But many times, whether you're watching someone teach you how to go through a joint lock or how to strike or all the elbow techniques or whatever, you never really see them closing the distance. It's like there's a magical moment where everything is just there for you, and then all of a sudden they're not going to move again.
Hey, this is Sifu Kuttel, and you're listening to Kung Fu Podcasts. Explore the culture, adventure, and impact of martial arts with your host, Sifu T.W. Smith.
Welcome to the program. You're in the audience of some of the finest and sharpest martial artists in the world. People that put in a great deal of sweat, care, and effort into honing their craft. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at a book review about kicks and sweeps. Statistically, kicks are used much less in non-sport fighting than punching, grabbing, and grappling. Probably could even say biting. Kicks can leave you quite vulnerable to counterattacks, especially if you don't use the right types of kicks or you don't practice the kicks at all and you decide you're going to start wailing on some. They also, as much as the movies may have you believe it, do not provide you really any advantage at all against weapons like a knife. So that's the prosecution of kicks. What about the defense? They can be instrumental in providing you an opportunity to maintain distance and to disrupt your enemy's mobility and timing. Today we're looking at why a selection of kicks and sweeps should be in your arsenal, how to choose a couple that will go with your martial arts style, and what you need to do in order to train them. Where we're going to get all this information? A review of the 2024 book, Chole Foot Kicking and Sweeping Techniques by Brian Kuttel. Brian was on the program some time ago in episode 207, so go ahead and look that up. You should have a link for it in your show notes. His book on kicking and sweeping techniques has 15 reviews already and has a 5-star rating. I've read it from cover to cover and already highlighted several pages out of it, and I would give it 5 stars without any hesitation. And as I speak about no hesitation, please consider going over to twsmith.us and support Kids with a Dream. We set up a GoFundMe page. I do not get a penny out of this. It's all for the kids to provide them an opportunity to attend martial arts conferences where they've been identified by their instructor or Troy Price at the Shuri-Te Bujitsu Kai to attend a conference, and perhaps they just don't have the resources for it. So please, twsmith.us, you'll see the link right up there, support a dream. Now, Brian Kuttel excels in Chole Foot. However, I can tell you by reading this book will support any type of martial arts style. I can say that because this book is laid out in a way that he's going to help you look into the possibilities in the chapter, for example, context, application, and combat. And why do you need some types of kicks? And how do you apply them? With many different situations, at different angles, and with different intents, which is also a very unique approach in his book about talking with you about the intent of a kick. Brian writes about how context is the general situation that you may apply kicking, such as sparring, consensual fighting, sports, and or self-defense. Context also includes one of the more critical components of your training, your clothes. Recently, I saw a good friend of our Kung Fu family and of the program, Ando Merzwa, and he published a clip on training in various types of clothes. In fact, I think he was talking about training naked. Throwing kicks at your classmate naked is probably not recommended, and we certainly don't want to see it. Kicking is definitely influenced by your clothes and your footwear. So if you're practicing kicking and you want to use it or make sure you can use it, make sure you practice in your regular clothing. Brian defines application as, quote, how the kick is used within the confines of the context and its consequences, end quote. He does a fantastic job breaking down the subject of kicks and sweeps into bite-sized pieces. The why not, how to use it, and what to do to train it. From pages 20 to 24, you get the details about kicking for combat and kicking for self-defense, while understanding, quote, a skilled kicker is not confined to being simply a long-range fighter, end quote. When it comes to you deciding how you want to practice applying them, training your strategic targets is a blend of how you train your footwork, your flexibility, your mobility, and the drills that you go through in order to, quote, understand angles, timing, and controlling the opponent, end quote. A section of this book that I'm glad that Brian includes in this process is called Closing the Distance. Now, it didn't surprise me that he included it because he's a Chole foot man, but many times, whether you're watching someone teach you how to go through a joint lock or how to strike or all the elbow techniques or whatever, you never really see them closing the distance. It's like there's a magical moment where everything is just there for you, and then all of a sudden they're not going to move again. Sifu Chen used to explain it that in many cases of demonstrations that you'll see that it's all offense and no defense. You certainly don't want to go into a courtroom where the prosecution is just going to lay it down and there is no defense. But when it comes to closing the distance, this is so often overlooked in training and not nearly trained enough. As Brian says, quote, closing the distance is an art all unto itself, end quote. In this section, he gives you really good suggestions about which kicks are usually best for closing the distance and why. What kind of footwork training do you need to do that goes along with these kicks, such as shuffling, stepping, or lunging? A progression of training from optimal kick distance to increasing the distance as well, and changing the angles to get yourself into a kick. An excellent tip that Brian gives you that is much easier to do today than it was decades ago is that once you learn the mechanics of a kick and you're getting ready to get started and you're practicing closing the distance, for goodness sakes, video yourself or have some impartial, honest friend who's going to watch you and try to understand what it takes to close the distance. So many times when I'm training anybody across any style, because they're so used to starting in book kung fu range or demonstration range, they will literally walk up into punching range to get started into their closing the technique, or they will just casually try to inch their way in. That's when you really get hurt. So video yourself going from out of the distance to closing the distance and look for every little tail that you have. In fact, Brian says check for tendencies and telegraphing. For example, do you drop your head or clench your fists before you try to close the distance? This helps you identify risks and discover why the kick was so easy to block, see, catch, or counter. On the top of these pages, as I was reading, I just made a note saying great detail. Brian takes you through how to maneuver for managing the distances, adjusting heights, and the 2 times best to feint. Feinting is not something that I recommend to folks early in the beginning because there's just too many mistakes made. I really like how Brian takes you through and he emphasizes how that a successful feint should be thrown as strong and as intentioned as the original technique, end quote. The phrase that I use is it shouldn't look flimsy. It shouldn't look lazy. It shouldn't be looking like I'm thinking about what I need to do, so let me just throw a feint to see if an opportunity pops up. One of the chapters is kicking energy. This is a section that Brian is going to demonstrate his breadth of knowledge in kicking. He shares 10 kicking energy mechanics. For example, thrusting is a different energy than snapping or pushing, which makes up 3 different energies, and he gives you 7 more. I like this chapter because it can be easily personalized to your toolbox. For example, when I'm training, I'm usually a thruster and a fencer to putting up a block. While some of the students are also snappers and really good with it, down low particularly, and one of my students is a really good pusher. But you may be a slicer or a piercer. There is a lot of information in those pages, and they're really good to put in there and pull out and put in your toolbox. Then there's 26 insightful pages to stances and footwork. Yeah, let me say that again. 26 pages of stances and footwork. Why is it important? As stated, quote, footwork is incredibly important for controlling a combat exchange, making distance to evade an opponent's attack, or making room for your striking technique, end quote. As he states, it's really important to put in time to thoroughly explore how each kick can be launched from different footwork positions. Then Brian is going to take you through illustrated options of 22 different kicks. I only used 2, maybe 3. He gives you a good illustration, then a paragraph description of each one. Then with each kick, there's a detailed method to execution, there's application, and another paragraph to combat tactics. These 5 sections are covered on all 22 kicks. The last section of the book is perhaps my favorite, the section of sweeps. Defining sweeps, an excellent description of when and how to use them. I'm a big believer in sweeps because when you are inside the combat gate, sweeps can end an engagement swiftly. Once again, you get all 5 sections of the information per sweep: the description, illustrations, method, applications, and tactics to execute it. And the last 29 pages are dedicated to what you've got to do in order to get better at your kicking and sweeping, with illustrations and descriptions of stretching, balance exercises, strength training for kicks and sweeps, then different types of training equipment and conditioning to practice for kicks and sweeps. My suggestion is first, get the book. It is well worth it. Links are in the show notes. You will quickly recognize that Brian has an impressive knowledge on the subject, and he has a set up an excellent format to share it in. How to select a kick and a sweep to start with, and then how you can get better at them. Pick the ones that fit in your toolbox. Apply what you learn through the spectrum of engagement, from being at distance to closing the distance, in close range, getting out of close range, and finish always by getting your enemy down or subdued. I hope you enjoyed the episode. You can find a link to the book and anything else I mentioned, including Support the Kid's Dream, where we can get a kid to a martial arts conference that has earned the opportunity but doesn't have the resources. Have a great practice today. Pick a couple of kicks. I'd love to hear from you. twsmith.org or kungfupodcast@gmail.com.